Coffee's gone cold. Third cup. I've been sitting in this rust bucket car for 5 hours and my leg's asleep. But that's the job I gave myself anyway. The guy inside that house, the one with the nice lawn and the little welcome mat, he's a monster. The kind the law can't touch. The kind the papers call a pillar of the community. I know better. I've got the files. I do my homework. My old partner, Francis, he used to call me obsessive. He said it like it was a bad thing. I just call it being thorough. The cops, they're drowning in red tape. They need probable cause, warrants, due process. I just need to be sure, and I am. I'm always sure. So yeah, I'm sitting here. The streetlights just buzzed on, painting everything in that sick yellow light. It's quiet, but I'll wait. He has to come out eventually, and when he does, I'll be there to deliver the kind of justice you can't appeal. You're probably thinking I'm crazy. A 45-year-old man playing vigilante in a beat-up sedan. Maybe I am, but you don't know what I saw. You don't know what they took. I used to wear a badge. I used to believe in the system. I was a detective, had a whole life, a real one. My wife, Shu Min. My son, Henry. He was 6. He had this stupid little laugh, sounded like a goose. Then came the case, the one that broke everything, the one they couldn't solve. Insufficient evidence, that's what the final report said. They came into my home, and what they did to Shu Min and Henry. I looked at the files. I saw the man who did it. I knew it in my gut. The same way I know about the guy in this house right now. But the system let him walk. I quit the next day. I sold the house, I took my pension, and I started this. I threw my badge in the river, but I kept the skills. I kept the anger, the grief. It's fuel. It burns hot. People tell you to let that stuff go. They don't understand. You can't let it go. It's what keeps me sharp. But I'll be honest with you. There's this cold spot right in my chest. I'm hunting monsters. I am. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm looking at the photos of the next person on my list, I get this sick, twisting feeling. What if you stare into the dark for too long and the dark stares back and it likes what it sees? What if you spend so much time hunting evil that you forget what good even looks like? The light just went on upstairs in his house. Showtime. This is it. This is the moment. The moment I define good and evil all over again.
I didn't use the front door. People like him, they have security systems, but they never check the little things. The doggy door, long since unused. The latch on the basement window. I'm good at the little things. The house was quiet, smelled like old lemons and dust. I moved silent, old training. Up the stairs, the light was on in a study. He was just sitting there, reading a book. A nice, normal-looking guy with graying hair. He looked up when I stepped into the doorway, not scared, just annoyed, like I was a bug. "Can I help you?" he asked. I held up the photo, a picture of a girl, 17, the one the cops found in the river, the one they couldn't tie to him. "You remember her," I said. It wasn't a question. His face didn't change. "I think you should leave." That's when the rage hit me, the hot, pure fire. The same fire I felt when I saw the man who killed Shu Min. This certainty. "The system lets you go," I said, stepping into the room. The air felt heavy, thick. I won't. I was on him. I had my hand on his throat, pushing him back against his big oak desk. I was screaming at him. All the facts from the file, all the things he did, and all I wanted was to see the fear in his eyes. But as I was shouting, as my voice was cracking with this judgment, the room went cold. I mean, ice cold. My breath fogged in front of my face. The nice lamp on his desk flickered, and then it buzzed. A sound so low it was more feeling in my teeth, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't just him anymore. It was like looking at a person and not. There was something clinging to him. A stain. No, that's not right. It was a shape, a parasite made of shadow, clinging to his back. Its limbs wrapped around his chest, its face pressed against his. It was pulsing, a wet, oily black that seemed to drink the light in the room. The man I was choking, he started to smile, a horrible, stretched out smile. "You see it too, don't you?" he whispered, his voice gurgling. I stumbled back, letting him go. I fell over a chair. My heart was trying to punch its way out of my chest. What was that? I'd spent my life hunting evil, and I thought I knew what it looked like. I was wrong. I finally got the car started and just drove. I was trying to tell myself, I imagined it, that I was overworked, grieving, hallucinating. It was just a man, a bad, evil man, and I did what I had to do. But I couldn't shake the feeling, the cold, the certainty it gave me. It felt good. It felt right.
I was driving through the city, the street lights blurring. I stopped at a red light. A guy was crossing the street, just a normal guy in a suit, talking on his phone. And I saw it. It was small, a little twitching gray smudge over his left shoulder. Barely there, but it was. He was just a guy. He probably, I don't know, cheats on his taxes, lies to his wife. The light turned green. The guy behind me honked. I couldn't move. I was just staring. What was his sin? How wicked was he? The cold spot in my chest, it was buzzing, like it was hungry. That was 6 weeks ago, or maybe 6 months. I don't look at calendars anymore. The hunger, it's not a cold spot now. It's a furnace. And I'm seeing them everywhere. The smudges, the stains, the oily, pulsing shadows. They're on everyone. The mailman who steals magazines, the landlord who forgets to fix the heat, the kid who bullies other kids in the park. Wicked. All of them. The world is filthy, and I'm the only one who can see it. The only one who can clean it. I tried to fight it. I really did. I tried to stick to the big ones, the ones who really deserved it, the murderers, the rapists. But the thing inside me doesn't care about scale. It just cares about the act, the judgment, the lie, the sin. It's getting harder to sleep. The whispers, they're not on the edge of my hearing anymore. They're right inside my skull. They're telling me I'm doing good work, that I'm the only one left who knows right from wrong, that my certainty is a gift, that I am the new system. And I was. I was the only one. Until Francis, my old partner, the one who called me obsessive. He was the last good man I knew. My last tie to the person I used to be. The man who had a wife and a kid. The man who used to laugh like a goose, just like Henry. I went to his house, not to hunt, to talk. I was falling apart. I was scared. The hunger was too much. The smudges were everywhere. I couldn't tell the shades of gray apart anymore. It was all just black.
I was gonna beg him for help. It was my last try, my one attempt to escape. I hammered on his door. It was raining, 1 a.m. He opened it, wearing a bathrobe, his face a mess of sleep and pity. Carlos? My God, man, get in. You look like hell. I stumbled into his hallway, and the one that I'd been in 100 times for barbecues, for birthdays. And as I stepped over the threshold, I saw it. It wasn't a smudge. It was a shroud. A thick, choking, gray film covered him from head to toe.
The buzzing in my chest became a physical scream. The whispers weren't whispers. They were a roar. Him. He lied. He failed them. Carlos, Francis was saying. He put a hand on my arm. You're shaking. Let me get you a drink. We can talk. His touch felt slimy. The gray film dripped from his fingers. What did you do, Francis? My voice was cold. It wasn't mine. What? What are you talking about? And the thing, it showed at me. A flash. Francis at the precinct, years ago, right after Schumann and Henry. He was talking to the chief. Don't tell him about the other witness, the homeless guy. It's nothing. It'll just break him more. It leads nowhere. Just let him grieve. A lie. A white lie. He was trying to protect me, to spare me a dead end, a kindness. But the thing in my chest didn't see kindness. It saw obstruction. It saw a lie, a betrayal. He had hidden a fact. He had failed the case. He had failed Schumann. No, I whispered, clutching my head. No, he's a good man. He was my friend. Stop it.
He let them die. He failed you. He is wicked.
Francis grabbed me, shaking me. Carlos, snap out of it. You're sick. You need help. You lied to me. About the case. About Schumann. His face went pale. Carlos, how did you... It was nothing. A dead end. I was trying to... You lied. I didn't mean to push him. He was just so filthy. So gray. He stumbled back, hit his head on the edge of the stair banister. A sharp crack. He just slid down the wall. He wasn't moving. House was silent. The gray shroud on him, it just evaporated like mist. He was clean. I stood there, panting. The rain was lashing against the door. The roaring in my head, it stopped. It was quiet. It was purring. I looked at Francis, my partner, the man who'd been at my wedding, the man who'd cried with me at the funeral, and I felt nothing. No rage, no grief, no justice, just quiet. That was the moment. The terror I'd been holding back, the fear of what I was becoming, it was gone. Because it had already happened. I finally understood. The man who came into my home and took my family, he was a monster. But I was justice, and justice is cold. Justice is absolute. Justice doesn't feel. I turned and walked out the door, back into the rain. I didn't call it in. The system can't touch me. I'm outside all of that now. I'm sitting in my car. It's parked in some alley. The rain is washing the filth of the city into the gutters. It's the only sound. I started all this for them, for Schumann, for Henry. I wanted to burn the world down to punish the wicked who hurt them. Now, I am the man who comes into a house in the middle of the night. I am the man who takes. I am the unsolved case. I am the monster in the dark that all men should be afraid of. The cold spot in my chest, it's not cold anymore. It's not even a furnace. It's just me. I'm looking out the windshield. A woman is walking her dog under a flickering streetlight. She's annoyed. She's thinking about how much she hates her neighbor, how she wishes something bad would happen to him. I see the small, dark, beautifully wicked little smudge forming over her heart. The engine starts. The job isn't done. The world is still so dirty. But I'm here to clean it. I have to. I'm the only one who's sure. And I am. I am always sure.
Look, I need you to understand something before I get into the really bad stuff. I'm not crazy. I'm really not. I'm just tired. Bone deep tired. It started with the house. I bought this old farmhouse about 40 kilometers outside the city. Everyone told me I was losing my mind. A single woman, 7 months pregnant, moving into a fixer-upper in the middle of nowhere. But I needed this. I needed the silence. I'm an artist. I work with scrap metal mostly, welding old, rusted car parts into sculptures that look like birds or angels. I take broken, sharp things and I make them whole again. I'm good at it. I'm resourceful. So looking at this house with its peeling wallpaper and sagging porch, I didn't see a ruin. I saw a sanctuary. I was standing on a stepladder yesterday, trying to paint the nursery. It's a small room, maybe 3 meters by 3 meters. I chose this soft, buttery yellow color because I didn't want the standard pink or blue. I wanted something like sunshine. My back was killing me, and my ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits. But I was humming. I was happy. I have paint in my hair half the time, my nails are always short and chipped. I talk to myself when I work. It's a habit from spending too many long nights alone in the studio. "All right, little bean," I said to my stomach, rubbing a spot where the baby was pushing out hard. "We're going to be okay here. Just you and me. No noise, no drama." That's my goal, you see, to build a fortress, a place where nothing bad can get in. I was standing down the window frame, watching the dust motes dance in the light, feeling that fierce, protective burn in my chest. I thought I was building a home. I didn't know I was building a cage. You need to know about Chad to understand why I'm here alone. Actually, you don't really need to know him. He was just a guy. Charming for a month, boring for 2, and gone by the 3rd. But he left me with this. When I saw that second pink line on the test, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I felt relieved. Is that weird? Growing up, my house was cold. Not temperature cold, but emotionally cold. My parents were there, but they weren't present. I was always an inconvenience to them. I learned to be self-sufficient real fast because asking for help just got me a sigh and an eye roll. So this baby, this was my chance to prove that love doesn't have to be earned. I wanted to give this kid the kind of unconditional, messy, overwhelming love I used to dream about when I was a kid hiding under my covers. I wanted to be the mother I never had. I told Chad I was keeping it. He panicked, obviously. He bailed. But his mother? That's where the ice settles in my stomach. Mrs. Bedmar. She's this tiny bird-like woman with eyes that look like black glass. When she found out, she didn't get angry. She got weirdly calm. She invited me over for tea right before I moved out here. She touched my stomach and her hands were freezing. I mean, unnatural cold. She whispered something about bloodlines and legacy. She gave me these herbal teas to drink. For the baby's strength, she said. I drank them because I wanted to be polite, because part of me still craved that maternal approval, even from a woman who gave me the creeps. That was a mistake.
Ever since that tea, the baby moves differently. It doesn't flutter, it thrashes. Sometimes late at night, when the silence of the farmhouse gets too heavy, I swear I can hear scratching coming from inside me. Like it's not trying to grow, it's trying to dig its way out. I just wanted to be a good mom. I just wanted to fix something broken. But I think something broken is growing inside me. And I'm terrified of what face it's going to have when it finally meets the world. It was a Tuesday when the denial finally stopped working. I remember because the rain was hammering against the tin roof of the workshop, loud enough to drown out my thoughts. I was trying to weld a wing onto a new piece, a phoenix rising from a pile of transmission gears. I had my mask up, taking a break, sipping that tea Mrs. Bedmar gave me. It tasted earthy, bitter, like sucking on a penny. I usually hated it, but my body had started craving it in a weird way. Like an addiction I didn't consent to. I felt the baby shift. Usually at 8 months, it feels like a rolling wave, right? A heel sliding across your ribs. This wasn't that. It was sharp, sudden. I dropped my mug. It shattered on the concrete floor, splashing that dark, brownish liquid everywhere. I doubled over, clutching my stomach. It didn't feel like a kick. It felt like something rigid turning over inside me. You know the sound a rusted hinge makes? That groaning, grinding noise? I swear I felt that sensation vibrate through my own pelvis. I stood there, gasping, waiting for it to pass. I told myself, it's just Braxton Hicks. It's just the baby getting into position. But then the taste hit the back of my throat. I hadn't thrown up, but my mouth was suddenly filled with the taste of copper, blood, and something else, like old, wet dirt. I looked down at the puddled leaves. In the leaves didn't look like leaves. They looked fibrous, stringy, like hair. I went inside to clean up. I needed to look at my belly and see the normal round shape that proved I was just being paranoid. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I don't know why I locked it. I live alone. Maybe I was trying to lock the fear out. I lifted my shirt and stared into the mirror. The fluorescent light in there is unforgiving. My skin looked translucent, blue veins mapping up paths across my stomach. Then it moved again. I watched, frozen, as a shape pressed outward against my skin just above my navel. I know anatomy. I'm an artist. I study forms. I know what a knee looks like. I know what an elbow looks like. The thing pushing against my skin was too long. It had too many joints. It pressed out, stretching the skin so thin I thought it would tear. And I saw the outline of something hooked, like a talon or a finger that had been broken and set wrong. It dragged slowly across my stomach, from left to right. It wasn't exploring. It was testing the strength of the wall. I didn't scream. I couldn't. All the air left my lungs. I just stared at my own body, realizing that the curve of my stomach wasn't soft and nurturing anymore. It looked hard, distended.
And for a split second, before the shape retracted back into the depths of me, I saw the skin ripple, not like flesh, but like something struggling under a heavy, wet blanket.
I couldn't stay in the house. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the house was holding its breath, watching me. I ran to the kitchen. I needed to get that jar of tea. I needed to take it to a doctor, a lab, anyone who could tell me what I'd been putting into my body. My hands were shaking so bad I knocked the jar off the counter. It didn't break. The lid popped off and the contents spilled across the linoleum. I fell to my knees, frantically trying to scoop it up, and that's what I saw it. Amidst the dried herbs and the mulch, there were things that didn't belong. Small white chips. I picked one up. It was hard, serrated. A tooth. A baby tooth. Entangled in the roots were clumps of gray, wiry hair. I gagged, scrambling backwards, scrambling away from the mess. I needed to leave. Now. I grabbed my keys and made for the door. I was gonna drive to the city, to the ER. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I got my hand on the doorknob. A pain, brighter and hotter than anything I've ever felt, exploded in my lower back. It wasn't a contraction. It was a command. My legs gave out instantly. I hit the floor hard, dropping the keys. They skittered away, just out of reach. I tried to crawl. I tried to drag myself toward the door, toward the car, toward sanity. But the baby, the thing, it bore down. It wasn't moving down the birth canal. It was anchoring itself. I felt a weight settle in my hips that was impossibly heavy, like I was filled with lead shot. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't even twitch them. It had severed the connection? Or maybe it was just pressing on the nerves so hard that I was paralyzed. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling where a water stain looked like a screaming face, tears streaming into my ears. And then I heard it. Not from the nursery. Not from outside. I heard a hum. A low, raspy lullaby. Rock-a-bye, baby. It was coming from inside me. My stomach rippled again, violently this time, and I realized with a cold, absolute certainty, I wasn't in charge of this body anymore. I was just the vessel, the container, and the cargo was waking up. I screamed then. I screamed for help, for my mom, for Chad, for anyone. But the farmhouse is 40 kilometers from the city. The nearest neighbor is a cornfield. The only thing that hurt me was the thing inside me, and it responded. The humming got louder. It wasn't a soothing sound. It sounded like metal grinding on metal. It sounded like the scrapyard I used to scavenge for parts. It vibrated in my teeth, in my skull. I felt a pressure build in my chest, a suffocating weight that had nothing to do with asthma and everything to do with possession. I realized then that Mrs. Bedmar hadn't given me tea to make the baby strong. She had given me tea to make the vessel weak. She knew. She knew exactly what her bloodline was, and she knew she needed a host stupid enough and desperate enough to carry it.
The ambulance ride is a blur. I remember red lights strobing against the trees, turning them into skeletal fingers reaching for the road. I remember screaming, not just from the pain, but because I could feel it fighting me. It didn't want to come out. It wanted to stay in the warm. By the time we hit the hospital, the bright, sterile lights felt like an interrogation. Doctors were shouting. Nurses were holding my shoulders down. Breathe, Celeste,
breathe, they kept saying. But how do you breathe when your lungs are being compressed by something that feels like a coiled snake? I tried to tell them. I grabbed a nurse's scrub top, bunching the fabric in my fist. Don't let it out, I rasped. You don't understand. It's not right. It's not right. They just patted my hand. It's just the pain talking, honey. You're doing great. They didn't know. They couldn't hear the humming. It had gotten louder, vibrating in my teeth. It was a frequency that made my vision blur. When the moment finally came, the room went dead silent. You expect crying, right? You expect that squalling, life-affirming scream of a newborn. There was nothing, just the wet slap of flesh and the sound of a tray clattering to the floor. I pushed myself up on my elbows, fighting the exhaustion that felt like drowning. Let me see, I demanded. My voice sounded wrecked, like I had been swallowing gravel. The doctor, he was backing away. His mask was still on, but his eyes were wide, blown out with pure, unadulterated horror. He was holding his hands up, bloody gloves trembling. The nurse holding the bundle was shaking, visibly shaking. She looked like she wanted to drop it, but some professional instinct was keeping her arms locked. Give it to me, I said. And this time, it wasn't a demand. It was a surrender. She hesitated, then stepped forward and lowered the blanket. It wasn't a baby, not really. The limbs were all wrong, too long, twisted at impossible angles like a spider that had been stepped on but didn't die. The skin wasn't pinky, it was a mottled gray, patterned with dark, swirling bruises that looked like old sigils. And the face, it didn't have a nose, just two slits, and the eyes were already open. They weren't milky blue newborn eyes. They were black glass, just like Mrs. Bedmar's. It looked at me. It didn't cry. It just observed. It studied me with an intelligence that was ancient and cold. A wave of nausea hit me, but under that, something worse. Recognition. My heart stuttered, and then, God help me, it swelled. This twisted, broken thing. It was mine. It was the scrapped metal sculpture that I had forged from my own body. It was hideous, it was wrong, and it was the only thing in the world that belonged to me. It's okay, I whispered, the words tasting like bile. Mama's here? The creature blinked, its mouth opened, revealing gums that were hard and ridged like a shark's. It reached out a hand with 4 fingers and a thumb that bent backward and gripped my hospital gown. It didn't let go.
He wanted to keep him. The doctors use words like genetic anomaly, severe deformity, and institutional care. They looked at me with pity, thinking I was in shock. They didn't understand. I couldn't leave him. If I left him, Mrs. Bedmar wins. If I left him, I'm just another parent who turned away when things got hard. I promised unconditional love. I promised I wouldn't be like my parents. So, we're home now. I don't go into the nursery anymore. The yellow paint feels like a lie. We stay in the living room, curtains drawn. The sunlight hurts his eyes. He doesn't eat like a normal baby. He doesn't latch. I have to feed him other things, raw things. He has teeth, you see. A full set of sharp, serrated little needles that came in 3 days after we got home. Sometimes when I'm holding him, rocking him in the dark, I can feel the hate radiating off of him. It's heavy, like static electricity. I know he's not just a baby. I know he's a curse wrapped in skin. I know Mrs. Bedmar is laughing somewhere, knowing she turned my dream of family into a nightmare.
that then he reaches up with one of those long, multi-jointed fingers and touches my cheek. His touch is cold, so cold it burns. "I love you," I whisper to him over and over, like a prayer. Or maybe a spell. I'm so tired. I'm terrified every single second of every single day. But I'm his mother, and a mother loves her child, even if that child is a monster. Even if that love is the bars of the cage I built for myself. This is it. This is my life now. Just me, the silence, and the thing only a mother could love.
My entire life, believe it or not, has been about control. Not in a domineering way, but in a quiet, methodical way. I control variables. I isolate pathogens. As an epidemiologist, I chart the chaotic, terrifying spread of a disease until it becomes a predictable pattern. A dragon I can map and eventually slay. It's what I'm good at. It's why I came back to this forgotten little town I once called home. I left a big, important job with a national research institute, fancy labs, proper funding, decent coffee, to set up shop in the old public library here, surrounded by the smell of dust and decaying paper. Because something was making people sick, and no one else was coming. I told myself it was my duty. I told myself I was the only one who could get to the bottom of it. That's the story I gave everyone, anyway. Dr. Arifa Khan, the brilliant hometown girl, returning to save the vulnerable. It wasn't a lie, not really. My work is everything to me. I see the world in infection rates and patient zeros. It's a language I learned to speak so that I would never, ever be helpless again. This town, with its peeling paint and its deep, quiet forests that seem to swallow the sound, it's in my blood, and I couldn't stand the thought of it being wiped out by some mystery illness while I was miles away, publishing papers on less important things. My goal was simple: find the cause, create a treatment, and stop the spread. Be the protector this place never had. Be the person I needed when I was a child. It all comes back to Assad, my little brother. He was 7 when he died. It wasn't some complex, terrifying disease. It was a simple case of bacterial pneumonia, something that a single cheap round of antibiotics could have fixed. But we were poor, and the only clinic in town was understaffed and dismissive. They told my mother it was just a flu, to give him fluids and wait it out. I remember sitting on the edge of his bed, the room smelling of fever and old wood, holding his small, sweaty hand and watching him struggle for every rattling breath. I felt so small, so powerless. It was like watching someone drown in their own bed, a few feet from shore. In that moment, watching the light fade from his eyes, I felt a rage so pure and white-hot it scared me. It was a vow forged in grief and helplessness. I would learn the science, I would understand the enemy, and I would never again stand by while something I loved was destroyed by neglect. That agonizing powerlessness became the engine of my entire life. That's why my deepest fear isn't just death or even disease. It's the loss of control. The absolute terror of being a prisoner inside your own mind, watching your body do things you don't command. To have your hands, these hands I've trained to be so precise, so steady, move with a will of their own? The thought of becoming a puppet, pulled by the strings of some dark, primal thing inside me, that's the stuff of my nightmares. It is the horror of becoming your own monster. And it's a horror I'm starting to think I didn't leave in my imagination. Last night, I was working late, staring into my microscope at a blood sample from the latest victim. My eyes were burning, and the low, constant hum of the generator was the only sound. I felt a tremor in my right hand. I put it down on the table, flexing my fingers, telling myself it was just caffeine and exhaustion, a logical explanation. But then the tremor became an impulse, a clear, undeniable command that didn't come from my own thoughts, like a jolt of low-voltage electricity. My hand reached out, slowly, deliberately, and swept the entire tray of carefully prepared slides off the table. They shattered on the concrete floor, weeks of painstaking work gone in an instant. I watched it happen, a silent passenger in my own body, my mind screaming, "No, stop!" But the command was ignored. And as I stared at the glittering mess on the floor, a cold dread washed over me, far colder than any fever. It wasn't just that it had happened, it was that a part of me, a dark and unfamiliar part, had wanted it to. A deep, nihilistic satisfaction echoed in the back of my mind. I realized I couldn't stop it. The next morning, I tried to pretend it was a dream, a stress-induced nightmare. I swept up the glass, my movements stiff and overly deliberate, focusing on the simple, controllable task. I told myself I'd just work harder, remake the slides, rerun the tests. But the feeling of being a spectator in my own skin lingered, a foul taste in the back of my throat. I tried to call my sister, Yasmin, just to hear a familiar, grounding voice. My hand picked up the phone, but instead of dialing her number, my thumb scrolled to my old boss from the Institute, Dr. Al-Jamil, and hovered over the call button. I felt a sudden, powerful urge to tell him I'd made a mistake, that I was in over my head, that I was coming back. My mind recoiled in horror. No, don't. You can't abandon them. The thought was a shout in my head. My thumb trembled, fighting a battle I couldn't see, a war between my own will and this foreign impulse. After a long, agonizing moment, my hand spasmed and dropped the phone onto the desk with a clatter. I stared at my own palm, at the faint lines and calluses, and it felt like I was looking at a stranger who wanted to run. A coward.
I needed to see my family, not just for comfort, but to prove to myself that the world outside my lab was still normal, that this was a problem contained within my own exhausted mind. My mom was out for her weekly grocery run, but Yasmin was home from her classes at the community college. I found her in the kitchen, and the sterile, scientific part of my brain immediately started cataloging symptoms. She was gaunt, the skin stretched tight over her cheekbones, and her eyes, her bright laughing eyes, were hollow and dark. She was staring at a bowl of uncooked rice on the counter, her body unnaturally still. "Yasmin?" I said, my voice softer than I intended. Her head snapped toward me, a jerky, disjointed movement that made my stomach clench. And then I saw it. Her hand, moving with that same slow, deliberate alien purpose as mine had the night before, reached into the bowl. She brought a handful of hard, dry grains to her mouth and began to chew, the sharp, unnatural crunching sound echoing in the silent kitchen. But her face was a mask of pure terror. Tears were streaming from her wide, unblinking eyes as her own body forced her to eat. She was in there, trapped, a prisoner at her own table. My training, my entire life's work screamed at me to act, This wasn't some vague town-wide sickness anymore. This was my sister. This was Assad all over again. I lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, trying to pull her hand away from her mouth. Yasmin, stop! Stop it! The strength in her arm was shocking, unnatural for a girl her size. She didn't fight me, not consciously. Her body just resisted, a machine with a single horrifying purpose. The look in her eyes was a silent scream for help. I saw my own deepest fear reflected there, and I knew rational thought had left the building. My methodical brain shut down, replaced by the raw animal panic of a big sister watching her sibling get devoured from the inside out. My only thought was, I have to fix this. I will not be helpless again. That night, I went back to my family home with the medical kit. It was a monstrous breach of ethics, of everything I stood for, but I didn't care. I was an epidemiologist, yes, but first, I was her sister. I told myself it was just a blood sample, a simple draw to analyze back at the lab to find the pathogen I could map in Slade. Yasmin was asleep, her breathing shallow, her face still etched with that silent terror even in slumber. The house was quiet. I crept into her room, the syringe feeling cold and alien in my hand. I knelt by her bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found the vein in her arm, my movements practiced and sure, a small island of control in a sea of chaos. But as the needle was about to break the skin, her eyes snapped open. They weren't her eyes anymore. They were wide, black, and utterly primal. In one impossible, fluid motion that defied the jerky awkwardness from before, her body coiled and sprang. Her hand, not the trembling hand of a sick girl, but the iron-hard grip of a predator, shot out and clamped around my throat. I was thrown backward, my head hitting the floor with a sickening crack. Pinned beneath me, I wasn't looking at my sister. I was looking at a puppet. Its strings pulled by an insatiable hunger, its face frozen in the horror of its own actions. And the conscious part of her, the real Yasmin, was in her eyes, crying, screaming, begging me for help as her own hands tightened their grip, ready to kill.
Air became a luxury. My vision started to tunnel, the edges turning a fuzzy, sparkling gray. But the true horror wasn't the suffocation. It was the view. I was staring directly into my sister's soul, a terrified prisoner watching me die at her own hands. I saw every flicker of her agony, her silent, desperate pleas. My survival instinct, a primal thing, separate from thought, took over. I bucked my hips, throwing her weight off balance, and scrambled for the syringe I dropped. My fingers closed around it just as her body lunged again. I didn't aim, I didn't think, I just thrust the needle deep into her thigh, my own hand now a weapon against her. She didn't cry out. The thing controlling her didn't even seem to notice. But the real Yasmin, the one trapped inside, her eyes widened in a fresh wave of agony. Her body seized for a moment, a brief, violent tremor, and then collapsed beside me, unconscious. I lay on the floor, gasping for air, the taste of blood in my mouth, and listened. The silence of the house was gone. From outside, through the thin walls, came the sound of the town tearing itself apart. It was a symphony of repressed ugliness. The quiet grocer, who always overcharged, was now smashing his own shop window, his body methodically hurling canned goods at anyone who came near. His face was a mask of rage. A woman I'd known since childhood was walking down the middle of the street, laughing a high, manic laugh, while her hands tore at her own hair, pulling it out in bloody clumps. There was no screaming from the victims, only the terrified whimpers of the witnesses trapped inside their own bodies. It was an orchestra of primal chaos. I had to get out. They had to get Yasmin out. I managed to drag her, a dead weight, into the bathroom and lock the door. For hours, I just sat there on the cold tile, listening to the cacophony, my scientific mind trying to piece together a puzzle whose pieces were soaked in blood and madness. Then a new sound cut through the chaos. A low, steady drone, growing louder. Hope, fierce and desperate, flared in my chest. Planes! Someone had seen. Someone was coming to help. I scrambled to the small bathroom window. 3 large, unmarked cargo planes flew in low formation over the town, sleek and gray. It didn't matter. They were here. We were saved. A fine, almost invisible mist began to drift down from their wings, shimmering in the oppressive afternoon sun. People in the street below stopped their violent, disjointed movements. They looked up, their puppet bodies frozen, their trapped eyes wide with the same desperate hope I felt. But I knew better. My blood ran cold. I recognized the aerosol delivery system from my time at the Institute. It was a method used for the rapid, wide-scale deployments of not a cure. The mist settled over the market square. And then the silence came. It was sudden, absolute. One moment the air was filled with anarchy. The next as if the world's sound had been switched off. Every person in the street below simply stopped. Then, like marionettes whose strings had been simultaneously snipped, they fell. They didn't crumple or stagger. They just dropped. One moment standing, the next a heap of limbs on the dusty ground. No convulsions, no final screams. Just a clean and efficient and utterly silent extermination. The government had sent a cure. They had sent an eraser.
I felt nothing. The part of me that could feel horror or grief had been scoured clean. I was a hollow shell, filled only with a terrible crystalline understanding. I stumbled out of the bathroom. The house was still. Yasmin was standing by the bedroom window, her back to me. She was perfectly still. Yasmin, my voice was a dry rasp. She turned, and for a glorious, heart-shattering moment, it was her. The virus, the hunger, the puppet master, it was all gone. Her eyes were clear, lucid. They were the eyes of the little sister I had promised to protect. And they were filled with a terror so profound, it would haunt me for the rest of my days. She knew what was happening. She saw the bodies in the street. She looked at me, her mouth opening to say my name, but no sound came out. Her body went rigid. The life, the fear, the love, it all just vanished from her face, leaving a blank, empty mask. She stood there for a long second, a perfect statue of my failure, before toppling sideways onto the floor with a soft, final thud. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching the red dust from the street begin to settle on her still form. And I knew why I hadn't been affected by the aerosol. My security clearance, the standard inoculations I'd received at the Institute for working with weaponized bioagents. I was immune. This wasn't a tragedy I was a part of. It was an experiment I was designed to witness. My idealism, my fierce need to protect, my vow at my brother's bedside, it was all just a variable they had counted on. They needed someone with my skills on the ground, someone who would try to solve the puzzle, someone who would document the vector and the transmission, someone who would confirm the efficacy of their monstrous creation. I was not a doctor. I was the final page in their lab report. Now, silence is the only language this town speaks. I walk the streets alone, a ghost in a city of the dead. The sun beats down, baking the vibrant colors of the market stalls into faded, muted pastels. A fine layer of red dust covers everything. The overturned carts, the scattered produce, the bodies that lie where they fell. They look like sleeping children, their faces peaceful in a way they never were while the virus had them. I am the sole survivor. But survival is not a victory. It is a curse. It is my prison. My entire life was a reaction to that moment of agonizing helplessness beside my brother's bed. I built a fortress of knowledge, of control, all to ensure I would never be that powerless little girl again. And what was the result? I was forced to watch my sister die, just as helpless as before. My deepest fear was of becoming a puppet. And in the end, that is exactly what I became. Not to a virus, but to a system so cold it used my own soul against me. They pulled my strings, manipulated my grief, and turned my driving purpose into the instrument of my damnation. They left me alive, a conscious mind trapped in a body that is forced to walk these silent streets, forced to see, forced to remember. My freedom to die with them was taken from me. I have lost all sovereignty. I am a puppet whose strings were cut, left to stand alone on an empty stage after the final horrific act. And I can't stop. I can't stop walking. I can't stop seeing. I can't stop remembering.
You probably know my name, or at least you've seen my face smiling smugly from the back of those glossy food magazines while you wait for a root canal. I'm Joseph Ross, the man with the golden palate, the guy who once wrote a 3-page essay on the texture of a boiled egg that made a chef in Paris quit his job. People think I have the best life in the world. I fly first class, I eat at restaurants where the waiting list is longer than most marriages, and I get paid a fortune to complain about the wine pairing. But right now, I'm not sitting in a 3-star Michelin dining room with a napkin on my lap. I'm standing in mud that goes up to my ankles, sweating through a linen shirt that costs more than your car. We're about 5 kilometers deep into this godforsaken rainforest. I don't even know which country we're technically in anymore because the borders get really blurry when you're this far off the map. It's 35 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is so thick it feels like I'm breathing hot soup. I have 3 guides with me, locals who don't speak any English, which is fine by me because I'm not here to make friends. I'm here for it, the Helix Aeterna. To the scientific community, it's a myth. To the locals, it's bad luck. To me, it's the Holy Grail. It's a snail, supposedly, but not the kind you drown in garlic butter and parsley. This thing is rare, unique. They say its slime has a neurotoxic quality that, if prepared correctly, doesn't kill you. It unlocks taste buds you didn't even know you had. It supposedly lets you taste color. My guides look terrified. They keep stopping, pointing at the canopy, whispering things I don't understand. I just wave my hand and point forward. I promise them double the money if we find it before sundown. I'm tired, I'm bitten by bugs, and my knees are killing me. But I'm not turning back. I spent 6 months tracking this rumor. I'm not going home empty-handed. I take a swig from my canteen. Warm water. Disgusting. I spit it out into the ferns. I need something real.
You might think I'm crazy for doing this, dragging myself through a jungle at 40 years old, risking malaria for a mollusk, but you don't understand what it's like to be me. See, here's the thing about perfection. It gets boring really, really fast. I come from money, the kind of money that means you never have to hear the word no. My parents died when I was 20, leaving me a fortune and a total lack of direction. So I started eating. At first it was fun. I traveled to Tokyo, Paris, Lima. I ate the still beating heart of a cobra in Vietnam. I ate cheese that was aged in caves for 50 years. I've eaten things that represent the absolute peak of human culinary achievement. And that's the problem. About 5 years ago, I hit a wall. I was sitting in a restaurant in Copenhagen, eating a dish that had won every award on the planet. It was perfect. The texture, the temperature, the balance of acid and fat, it was technically flawless. And I felt nothing. It tasted like cardboard. Not because the food was bad, but because I had experienced it all before. My brain had mapped every flavor combination possible. Salty, sweet, sour, bitter, umami. I had exhausted them all. Do you know how terrifying that is? To realize that nothing will ever surprise you again? To know that the rest of your life is just going to be a series of disappointing meals until you die? That boredom, it's a physical weight. It sits in my chest like a stone. It makes me mean. It makes me cruel. I started writing vicious reviews just to feel something, just to see the chefs cry, because their pain was at least new. But it wasn't enough. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm hunting this snail. I found it just as the sun was dipping below the canopy, painting the jungle in bruises of purple and black. It was clinging to the underside of a fern, the Helix eterna. It was larger than I expected, the size of a man's fist, with a shell that swirled in iridescent patterns that seemed to move even when I held it still. The guides refused to touch it. They backed away, making signs against evil, their eyes wide and white in the gloom. I laughed at them. Superstition is just the fear of the uneducated. I didn't wait to get back to camp. I didn't wait to prepare a fire. The urgency was a claw in my gut. I took out my ceremonial knife, Damascus steel, custom handle, and I did what I came to do. Raw. That's how you taste the truth of a thing. The texture was revolting, rubbery, slick, fighting against my teeth. But then the flavor hit. It wasn't like food. It was like an electric shock to the tongue. It tasted like copper, like ozone, like the smell of the air right before a tornado touches down. It was violent. It was aggressive. It was the most incredible thing I had ever put in my mouth. For about 30 seconds, I was a god. I could feel every nerve ending in my body singing. Then the singing turned into a scream. My stomach cramped so hard I dropped to my knees in the mud. It wasn't just nausea. It felt like my insides were trying to untie themselves. The world tilted on its axis. The trees began to elongate, stretching up like prison bars. The sound of the jungle, the insects, the birds became a deafening roar like a jet engine inside my skull. I tried to call out to the guides, but my tongue felt too big for my mouth. My vision tunneled. The last thing I saw was the mud rushing up to meet my face. And the last thing I thought was, at least it wasn't bland. Waking up wasn't like waking up. It was more like being poured back into a container that didn't fit. I didn't open my eyes immediately. I couldn't. I felt exposed. That's the only word for it. Imagine having a sunburn, the kind that blisters, and then having someone drag sandpaper across it. Now imagine that sensation is over every single millimeter of your body. The air itself hurt. A gentle breeze felt like a knife slash. The humidity, which I had complained about earlier, was now the only thing keeping me from feeling like I was burning alive. I tried to stand up. I couldn't. My legs weren't there. I don't mean they were numb. I mean the neural pathways that told me how to bend a knee or flex a foot were just gone. Instead, there was a vast, undulating muscle underneath me. A foot? No, a soul. A massive, wet soul. I forced my eyes open, or what I thought were my eyes. My vision was split, disjointed. I wasn't seeing the jungle from 6 feet up. I was seeing the individual grains of dirt. I was seeing the intricate veins of a rotting leaf 2 centimeters from my face. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, just a wet, rasping noise. I looked down, or I tried to. My field of vision swiveled on stalks. I saw my body. It was gray. It was glistening with a thick, viscous mucus, and on my back a crushing weight, a spiral prison. I wasn't a man anymore. I was meat, soft, unprotected, vulnerable meat, dragging a house of bone on my back. The horror wasn't immediate. It was a slow, creeping freeze. I was trapped in this impossible biology, fully conscious, fully Joseph, but reduced to a smear of slime on the jungle floor. Denial is a powerful drug. For the first hour, or maybe it was days, time felt slippery now. I convinced myself this was a hallucination. The neurotoxin. It had to be. I was lying in a hospital somewhere, tripping out of my mind. But the pain was too specific. The way the sharp edge of a pebble sliced into my underbelly as I dragged myself forward, that was too real for a dream. Hunger clawed at me. Not the gourmet hunger I used to cultivate, but a desperate animal need. I smelled something sweet, something rotting. To my old nose, it would have been repulsive. To this body, it was ambrosia, bioluminescent fungus, glowing faintly blue in the twilight. I needed it. I began the agonizing process of inching toward it. Contract, extend, slide, pain. Contract, extend, slide, pain. It was humiliating. The great Joseph Ross, reduced to licking fungus off a log. I was halfway there when the ground shook. To you it would have been a footstep. To me was an earthquake. Thud, thud. Vibrations rippled through my slime, sending shockwaves of nausea through me. Something huge was coming. I froze. My instincts, new, terrified instincts, screamed at me to retract, to hide in my shell. But I couldn't look away. Through the ferns, a pair of boots appeared. Expensive leather. Italian. Custom made for trekking, but styled for the runway. I knew those boots. I had bought them in Milan 3 years ago. My eye stalk swiveled up past the khaki trousers, up past the linen shirt, sweat-stained and expensive, up to the face. It was me. Not me as I am now, me as I was. The Joseph of yesterday, the Joseph of 5 days ago. The timeline was broken. He stood there, towering over the clearing like a titan. He looked tired, angry, and arrogant. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. And then he stopped. He looked down. He looked right at me.
He didn't see me, though. He didn't see the terror in the way my eye stalks trembled. He didn't see a human soul trapped in a grotesque shell. He saw an ingredient. His eyes, my eyes, lit up with that predatory gleam I knew so well. It was the look I gave a waiter when the main course finally arrived. Finally, the giant boomed, his voice thunderous, shaking the leaves around me. There you are. He reached for his belt. He pulled out the Damascus steel knife. I tried to scream. I tried to shout, "Stop! It's me! You idiot! It's you!" But all I did was bubble. He took a step closer, his shadow swallowing my entire world. I had spent my whole life hunting for the perfect taste, and now I was about to find out exactly what it feels like to be the main course.
You have no idea how hot a human hand is. When I reached down, it wasn't like being touched. It was like being wrapped in a scorching, dry blanket. The ridges of his fingerprints felt like tire tracks grinding against my sensitive skin. I felt the calluses, rough as sandpaper, scraping against the mucus that was my only protection. The world lurched. Gravity reversed. I was hoisted into the air, spinning sickeningly. I tried to retreat into my shell, jamming my soft, fluid body into the tight spiral of bone. But there was nowhere deep enough to go. Through the opening of my shell, I saw the face. My face. Up close, it was monstrous. Pores the size of craters. Stubble that looked like a forest of black wire. And the smell. God, the smell. I always prided myself on my hygiene, but from this proximity, I smelled like stale coffee, dead animal, and chemical musk. It was suffocating.
Beautiful,
the giant whispered. His breath was a hurricane of hot, humid rot. I felt the steel blade of the knife pry at the edge of my operculum, the trapdoor of my shell. I pull it tighter, every muscle in my gelatinous body screaming in panic. I wanted to beg. I wanted to tell him that I had money, that I knew the secrets of the universe, that I was him, but I was just a snack. The knife slipped away. He wasn't going to cut me. He was a purist. He wanted the full experience. The hand moved higher. The sky was blocked out by the cavernous opening of his mouth. I saw the tongue, a massive, wet pink slab shifting impatiently. I saw the teeth, white, square tombstones designed for crushing. Please, I thought, please, I'm not food. He tilted his head back. I slid. I hit the tongue with a wet slap. It was slimy and impossibly hot, searing my skin like acid. A river of saliva, thick, enzymatic, disgusting, flooded over me, burning my eyes, drowning my breath. I thrashed. I bit the tongue with my tiny, rasping mouth, desperate to make him stop, to make him spit me out. He just frowned. He probably thought I was spicy. Then came the roof of the mouth, hard, ridged, and from below, the jaw began to close. The pressure was absolute. It wasn't pain at first. It was just math. His jaw strength against my shell's structural integrity. I heard the crack before I felt it. A sound like a gunshot inside a cathedral. My home shattered. Shards of calcium drove into my soft flesh. And then the teeth met the meat. It wasn't a quick death. It was an explosion of sensory data. I felt my own body being
pulped, my nerves firing every signal they had at once. Heat, pressure, acid, tearing. But beneath the physical agony, there was something worse. As his teeth sunk into me, I felt a connection, a spark. I tasted him, and he tasted me.
I spat it out. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex, violent and immediate. I gagged, retching, bending double as the masticated lump of shell and gray meat splattered onto the jungle floor. My guides jumped back, startled. I wiped my mouth, trembling. It wasn't the texture. I've eaten things with the texture of snot before. It wasn't the poison. It was the flavor. It didn't taste like wild garlic, or ozone, or any of the exotic things the rumors had promised. It tasted like despair. It tasted like a lonely apartment in New York filled with expensive furniture nobody sits on. It tasted like the silence after a funeral. It tasted like the moment you realize you've wasted 40 years of your life chasing a high that doesn't exist. It was the most bitter thing I had ever experienced. I stood there, gasping for air, staring at the ruined mess in the dirt. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. "Mr. Ross?" one of the guides asked. Is good?" I looked at him. I looked at the jungle, which suddenly seemed just like a bunch of wet trees. I looked at my hands, the hands of a killer, the hands of a glutton. "No," I croaked. My voice sounded thin like wind blowing through a dead valley. "No, it's finished." I left the jungle that day. I left the guides. I left the equipment. I flew back to civilization, back to my penthouse, back to my awards. But I never ate again. Not really. I put food in my mouth, I chew, I swallow. But there's no joy. There's no spark. Every truffle, every vintage wine, every perfectly seared steak, it all just tastes like ash. Because underneath it all, I can still taste that snail. I can still feel the phantom sensation of a shell cracking between my teeth. And in the quiet moments, right before I fall asleep, I can feel the ghost of a scream trapped in my throat. A scream that isn't mine, but belongs to something small, slimy, and infinitely sad. I just wanted to live. And they hunted myself down, and I won. And now, I am starving to death.
The things you think about when your world is ending is pretty funny. You don't think about the grand speeches or the history books. You think about the small things. The weight of your daughter's head on your shoulder as she sleeps. The smell of your wife's hair when you hold her close. The taste of borscht on a cold winter evening. These are the things that make a life. These were the things that made my life. My name was Nikolai, and I was a patriot. In the year 1961, that word meant something. It was a shield, a purpose. Our great nation, Russia, was locked in a silent, tense dance with the Americans. We were building a new world, a better world, forged in the heart of the atom. And I was one of its architects. I was a nuclear physicist, working on a project so secret, so powerful, that its success would ensure the safety of our motherland for 1,000 years. I believed that. I poured my soul into my work, into the complex equations and the humming machinery. because I knew it was all for them, for my Anya and my little Svetlana. Every night, I would leave the cold, sterile embrace of the laboratory and return to the warmth of my small apartment, a world away from the silent, invisible power I worked with every day. The moment I walked through the door, the weight of the state, the pressure of the project, it all just melted away. There was only the sound of Svetlana's small feet running to greet me, her arms wrapping around my legs, and Anya's soft smile, a smile that could calm the most turbulent seas in my heart. We had a simple life, but it was a good life. It was a life I would have done anything to protect. This drive, this need to be a protector, it wasn't just born out of love. It was born out of fear. A deep, cold fear that had taken root in me when I was just a boy. I remember my grandmother. In her youth, she was a formidable woman, the pillar of our family. But time is a cruel thief. It stole her memories, one by one, leaving her confused and frightened in a world she no longer recognized. Dementia, they called it. I just called it a nightmare. I saw the way my aunts and uncles looked at her. Their eyes, once filled with love and respect, now held a cold, hard glint of impatience. She had become a burden. I'll never forget the day I overheard them in the kitchen, their voices low and conspiratorial. "What are we going to do with her?" my Uncle Dmitri had said, his voice laced with a weariness that bordered on cruelty. "She can't even remember our names. It's too much." They spoke of sending her away, of leaving her to wither in some state-run facility, a place where old people were sent to be forgotten. They wanted to abandon her, their own mother, the woman who had raised them. The thought was a dagger in my young heart. I saw her sitting in her chair by the window, a frail, lost soul, and I made myself a promise, a silent, solemn vow. I would never be like them. I would never turn my back on family. I would stand as a guardian, a shield against the cruelties of the world. My work, the atom, it was my way of fulfilling that vow. It was the power to protect my country, and by extension, my family. I was building a fortress around them with science, ensuring that no harm would ever come to them. I was so proud, so foolish. I never imagined that the very thing I believed was their salvation would become my damnation, that the shield I was forging would become the sword that would tear my world apart. The beast I worked with had no face. It had no voice. It was a silent, invisible god sleeping in a tomb of concrete and lead. We called it the Core. It was the heart of our project, a seething, incandescent power that we prodded and measured, always careful, always respectful. We all knew the stories, the hushed whispers of accidents at other facilities, of men who got too close, who didn't show the proper respect, men who walked away feeling fine only to fall apart from the inside out days later. The Geiger counters were our constant companions, their steady, rhythmic clicking, a sort of prayer, a mantra that kept the invisible monster at bay. We trusted our instruments. We trusted the lead-lined walls. We trusted our math. But deep down, there was always a hum of fear. It was the fear of the unknown, of a force that could unmake a man at a cellular level, turning his own body into his executioner. It was a modern-day demon, one we had summoned ourselves. I suppose I never truly let myself believe it could happen to me. I was meticulous, careful, I followed every protocol. I was a professional. The real fear, the one that kept me awake some nights, was something else. It was the fear of becoming my grandmother, not in mind, but in body. The thought of my own flesh betraying me, of becoming something grotesque, something my own family would recoil from in horror.
The day it happened started like any other. The air in the facility was thick with the usual smells of ozone and sterilized metal. We were running a series of calibration tests, pushing the reactor to a higher output than ever before. There was pressure from above, of course. The Americans were making progress, and we couldn't fall behind. The schedule was aggressive, and corners, I fear, were being cut in the name of progress. I was in the control room with my colleague, Dmitry, monitoring the feedback from the core. The low hum of the machinery was the facility's heartbeat, a sound so familiar it was almost comforting. Then it changed. A high-pitched whine began to emanate from the console, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. A small red light began to flash, an insistent, angry pulse. "Coolant pressure fluctuation in sector gamma," Dmitry said, his voice tight. It was my sector. The protocols were clear. Initiate an immediate shutdown. But a shutdown would mean weeks of delays, endless reports, and questions from superiors who did not appreciate failure. "It's a sensor ghost," he said, a little too quickly. "It's happened before. Let's just recalibrate the flow." He was my senior, a man I respected. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the shutdown sequence. The alarm shrieked. "Nikolai, we don't have time. A manual valve adjustment will fix it. Go! I'll override the alarm from here." Against my better judgment, I went. The corridor leading to the reactor chamber was a long concrete tunnel, the air growing warmer with each step. The valve was in a small antechamber, separated from the core by a thick lead and plaster wall. As I entered the room, I felt it. A strange, prickling sensation on my skin, like 1,000 tiny needles. The air tasted metallic, coppery, like sucking on an old coin. And then I saw it. In the corner of my eye, a flash of the most brilliant, ethereal blue light, shimmering in the air for just a second before vanishing. It was the Cherenkov glow, the sign of raw, unshielded radiation. I froze. My blood turned to ice. I knew what it meant. A leak. A serious one. I threw my weight against the heavy valve, turning it with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The shrieking of the alarm back in the control room died down, replaced by the steady, familiar hum. It was over in less than a minute. I stumbled back into the control room, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dmitry was wiping sweat from his brow, a relieved smile on his face. "See? Just a sticky valve. Good work, Kolya." He clapped me on the shoulder. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him about the blue light, the taste in the air. But I couldn't. What would I say? That I imagined it? That I was panicking over nothing? We filed the report as a minor mechanical fault. A sticky valve. No mention of the alarm override. No mention of the blue light. No mention of the metallic taste that I couldn't get out of my mouth. I had walked into the dragon's lair, and I was terrified it had breathed its fire on me. That night, I went home and held my family tighter than ever before. I breathed in the scent of Anya's shampoo, the sweet, milky smell of Svetlana's fair. I tried to act normal. I told them my day was uneventful, just another day at the office. But I was a liar. I felt a strange internal vibration, a low-level hum beneath my skin that wouldn't go away. A headache began to throb behind my eyes. I told myself it was just stress, the adrenaline from the incident wearing off. But as I helped Anya with the dishes, I saw my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My face looked pale, waxy. My eyes seemed sunken, darker than usual. I was just tired, I told myself, exhausted. Later in the bathroom, I scrubbed my hands until they were raw, the soap and hot water doing nothing to wash away the feeling of invisible filth that clung to me. I looked at myself in the mirror, searching for any sign, any proof that my fear was just in my head. I looked the same, didn't I? I saw nothing, absolutely nothing, but I could feel it, a coolness spreading from my core, a deep cellular wrongness. It was a poison of the soul, and I knew with a certainty that defied all logic and reason that I had brought the beast home with me. It was inside me now, a silent passenger, waiting, and I was utterly, completely alone with my terror. A week went by. The headache faded, and the buzzing under my skin subsided. I began to convince myself I had imagined it all. The stress of the job, the pressure from our superiors, it was getting to me. I had overreacted. Life returned to its gentle, comforting rhythm. I played with Svetlana in the park, I held Anya's hand on our evening walks, and the fear began to recede, becoming a distant, half-forgotten nightmare. The incident at the lab was never spoken of again. The sticky valve was replaced, and the project moved forward. I was fine. I had to be fine. Then came the morning when it all began to unravel. I was in the bathroom, shaving. I was humming a little tune Anya liked. The warm water felt good on my skin. As I wiped the shaving cream from my jaw, I noticed it. A small red patch on my forearm, just below the elbow. It looked like a sunburn, but I hadn't been in the sun. It didn't hurt, but it itched. An insistent, maddening itch that I couldn't satisfy. I scratched at it absently, and then I looked down at my hand. A piece of my skin, about the size of a kopeck coin, had flaked off and was stuck to my fingertip. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Underneath, the flesh was raw, pink, and weeping a clear, oily fluid. There was no blood. The metallic taste of copper flooded my mouth, so strong that it made me gag. I dropped the razor. It clattered into the porcelain sink with a sound that seemed to echo in the silent apartment. I brought my finger closer to my face, my hand shaking uncontrollably. It was my skin, a piece of me. It was wet, translucent, and utterly alien. The humming in my body returned, louder this time, a symphony of decay. I looked from the sliver of flesh on my finger to the weeping sore on my arm, and then to my own terrified eyes in the mirror. This was it, the quiet beginning of the end. The beast was awake. It was hungry, and it was starting to eat.
I quickly hid my arm under my sleeve, my heart at frantic birth beating against my ribs. Anya was still sleeping. Svetlana was in her little bed, dreaming of whatever wonderful things 7-year-olds dream of. I couldn't let them see. Not yet. I spent the day in a state of quiet, hyper-vigilant terror. At work, I wore long sleeves, a constant clammy pressure against the weeping lesion on my arm. Every few hours, I would lock myself in a washroom stall, my hands trembling as I unwrapped the crude bandage I'd fashioned from gauze and medical tape. The patch was growing. The redness had spread, and the center of the wound was now a deeper, angrier shade of crimson, like a sunset on a dying world. The skin around it was puffy and blistered, and the clear fluid continued to ooze through the gauze with an alarming speed. The smell was the worst part. It was a sweet, sickly odor, like rotting fruit mixed with something chemical, something sterile and wrong. It was the smell of my own body decomposing while I was still living in it. I would stare at my arm, at this grotesque blossoming of decay, and a cold, calm certainty would settle over me. This wasn't an infection. It wasn't a rash.
This was the blue light. This was the metallic taste. This was the invisible fire I had walked through, and it was now burning me from the inside out. My mind, the logical, scientific mind that I had always trusted, was screaming at me. Radiation burn, acute exposure. But my heart, the terrified, desperate heart of a husband and a father, refused to listen. It couldn't be, because if it was, then my life as I knew it was over. And worse, much worse. I might have brought this curse, this invisible poison, into my home, into their lives.
Weeks passed. The test was a resounding success. The newspapers were filled with triumphant headlines, and Commander Volkov was decorated as a hero of the Soviet Union. I received a quiet commendation and a small bonus. I was a patriot who had done his part. But the fire I had walked through was now consuming me. My apartment, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, had become a living tomb, a sick room where I was the sole decaying patient. The man who shaved in the mirror every morning was a stranger, a grotesque parody of the person I once was. The radiation burns were no longer isolated patches. They were a roadmap of my ruin, covering my body in a quilt of weeping sores and blackened flesh. My skin, my own skin, was sloughing off in wet gelatinous sheets, revealing the raw muscle and sinew beneath. The smell, that sweet, sickly smell of my own decay, clung to everything. The furniture, the curtains, my wife's clothes. I could no longer hide it. I was a walking, breathing monument to my own failure, a horror show confined to our small two-room apartment. Anya and Svetlana were my unwilling audience. They tried, God, they tried. Anya would bring me food I couldn't eat, her hands shaking, her eyes never quite meeting mine. Svetlana, my little light, would stand in the doorway of my room, her small face a mixture of fear and a heartbreaking, childlike pity. She didn't run to me anymore. How could she? The arms that had once lifted her up to the sky were now raw, twisted things barely recognizable as human limbs. My face was a melting mask, my features slowly dissolving, my eyes milky white and sunken into the skeletal frame that was emerging from the ruins of my flesh. My deepest fear had come to life. I was my grandmother. I was the burden. I was the object of fear and disgust, the reason for the hushed, terrified whispers that now filled our home. I was being abandoned, not by being sent away, but by becoming something so monstrous that love itself could not bridge the gap. One evening I was sitting in my chair, wrapped in blankets that did little to warm the profound cellular cold that had taken root in me. Anya was in the kitchen, her quiet sobs a constant tragic soundtrack to our lives. Svetlana crept into the room holding her small, worn teddy bear. She stood a few feet away, her eyes wide, with a terrible, innocent curiosity. In my mind, in the fading echo of the man I used to be, I was still her father, her protector. My love for her was the one thing the radiation hadn't been able to touch, the last pure thing in my rotting shell. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that her papa was still here. I tried to speak, but the sound that came out was a wet, gurgling rasp. I tried to smile, but the muscles in my face no longer obeyed. So I did the only thing I could. I tried to reach for her. I lifted my hand, a gesture that had once been a promise of comfort and safety.
But the thing that rose from the blankets was not a hand. It was a grotesque, malformed claw of exposed bone and dripping flesh. I recoiled from my own body, a wave of self-loathing so powerful it almost stopped my heart. As I pulled my arm back, a piece of my forearm, a wet gray piece of what was once me, detached and fell. It was a small thing, but it fell with the weight of a dying star. It landed on Svetlana's cheek. She didn't scream. She just stood there, her eyes blinking, a look of confused surprise on her face. And then I saw it. The spot where my flesh had touched hers began to turn red, an angry, violent red. It was not a blush, it was a burn. Her perfect porcelain skin was blistering before my very eyes. The beast, the invisible fire that was consuming me, had passed through me. I had become its vessel. I had become the weapon. In my final, desperate act of love, I had poisoned my own child. The shield had not just failed, it had become the sword. I, her protector, was her destroyer. A sound finally tore from my throat, a sound of such utter despair and horror that it was no longer human. It was the sound of a damned soul realizing its own damnation.
I don't remember much after that. My world dissolved into a fever dream of pain and shadow. I was aware of hushed voices, of being carried on a stretcher, of the cold, sterile smell of a hospital. My last coherent thought was of Svetlana's face, of the red mark blossoming on her cheek. A few weeks after I was gone, after the fire inside me had finally consumed the last of what I was, Anya sat on a hard bench in a hospital corridor. Svetlana was in one room, our young son, Alexei, in another. They were both sick, a strange, wasting illness the doctors couldn't explain. A man in a crisp white coat, his face impassive and detached, approached her holding a clipboard. He didn't sit down. He spoke to her in a cold, clinical tone, his words precise and devoid of any human warmth. "We have the test results, Comrade Petrova." He said, "It is advanced radiation poisoning, systemic. There is significant cellular decay." Anya stared at him, not comprehending. The doctor continued, his voice unchanging. "Their bodies are failing from the inside out. I'm afraid there is nothing we can do. It will be slow." Anya looked from the doctor's cold eyes to the closed doors of her children's rooms, and she understood. She understood the sticky valve, the long hours, the commendation. She understood the smell that had clung to me, the way I had flinched from her touch. She understood the red mark on Svetlana's cheek. It was all a single, horrifying picture. The weight of it, the sheer, unimaginable cruelty of it broke her. She fell from the bench onto her knees on the cold, polished floor, a silent, guttural scream tearing from her throat, a sound that no one paid any attention to. My life's work, my solemn vow, born from the fear of seeing my grandmother abandoned, had come to its full, tragic circle. I had feared becoming a burden my family would want to leave behind. Instead, I became a contagion that ensured they could never leave, a poison that would follow them to their own slow, agonizing graves. My love was the weapon. My protection was the curse. And my greatest fear wasn't just realized, it was gifted, a final, horrific inheritance to the very people I had died trying to save.
You know that feeling when your stomach growls so loud you're scared the person next to you can hear it? That's my favorite sound in the world. It means I'm winning. It's 3:42 a.m. right now. I'm the only one left in practice room B at the agency. The air in here is gross. It smells like old sweat, floor wax, and that weird chemical lemon cleaner the janitors use. But I practically live here. The mirrors cover every single wall, floor to ceiling. You can't hide in here. There is literally nowhere to look where you don't see yourself. I'm staring at my thighs in the reflection. Again, I pinch the skin right above my knee. There's too much of it. I know normal people would say I'm crazy, that I'm skin and bones, but they don't have cameras pointing at them in 4K resolution. They don't know that the camera adds 5 kilograms. And in this industry, 5 kilograms is the difference between being a star and being a blurred out background dancer. My name is Melina, and if everything goes according to plan, my plan, I'm going to be the center of the new girl group debuting next month. Center. That means the most screen time, the most lines, the most eyes on me. But to be the center, you have to be perfect. Not pretty good, not talented, perfect. I take a sip of water. Room temperature. Cold water shocks the body and makes you bloated. At least that's what a trainee forum said, and I'm not risking it. I've been dancing the same routine for 6 hours straight. My legs are shaking so bad they feel like jelly, but I can't stop. The monthly evaluation is in 2 days. The director is going to be there. He has eyes like a hawk. If my arm is 1 centimeter too low, he sees it. If my waist looks a millimeter wider than it did last week, he sees it. I pull my shirt up to check my ribs. I can count them, but they aren't sharp enough yet. I just need to work harder. I just need to be lighter. Gravity is the enemy. If I weigh less, I can jump higher. I can move faster. I can disappear into the music until I'm nothing but light and rhythm. That's the goal, to take up as little space as possible while making the biggest impact. People ask why I'm like this, why I weigh my almonds, why I chew ice cubes for dinner. It's because I remember what it feels like to be the punchline. It happened a year ago at the Winter Showcase. It was supposed to be my big break. I was 18, talented, and stupidly confident. I thought my dancing would speak for itself. I was wearing this white outfit, shorts, and a crop top. I felt good. Then we did the interview segment on stage. The host handed the mic to Jason. You know him, right? Everyone knows him. He's the nation's boyfriend, the senior idol everyone worships. He was standing right next to me. He looked at me, looked me up and down, and then laughed into the microphone. Wow, he said, flashing that famous smile. Melina really stands out, doesn't she? She looks like she ate the other members for lunch. The audience roared. Thousands of people laughing at me. I stood there, frozen, with a plastic smile glued to my face, while inside, I was dying. I wanted the stage floor to open up and swallow me whole. Later that night, I made the mistake of checking social media. The clips were everywhere. The comments were worse. Pig. Thunder thighs. How can she be an idol looking like that? She's ruining the visual balance of the group. I scrolled until my eyes burned. Every comment was a knife, and the worst part, I believed them. They were right. I was disgusting. I had let myself go. I had let a little bit of puberty, a little bit of womanhood, ruin everything I had worked for since I was 5 years old. That night, I made a promise to myself in the bathroom mirror, wiping mascara off my cheeks. I promised I would never,
ever let anyone laugh at me again. I would sculpt myself into something hard and undeniable. I would cut away every soft part of me until there was nothing to ridicule. So now, when my stomach screams, I smile. It's not pain, it's just the feeling of the fat dying, and I need it all to die before the debut. I check the clock. 3:55 a.m. 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, and then I'll weigh myself. If the number isn't lower than yesterday, I'm not going home.
The ultimatum came on Tuesday. The director didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just tapped his pen on my profile sheet and said, "Melina, your visuals are lagging. Drop 3 kilograms by the final lineup selection, or we're cutting you. We have plenty of other girls who want this." 3 kilograms. In a week. It was impossible. I was already running on fumes. That night, I didn't go back to the dorms. I took a taxi to the district everyone whispers about, but no one admits to visiting. The streets were narrow, lit by flickering neon signs that hurt my eyes. I met the broker in the back of a PC bang. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a bored college student. He slid a small, clear Ziploc bag across the table. Inside was a single silver pill. No label, no instructions, just smooth, seamless metal. "It's not medicine," he told me, his eyes glued to his computer screen. "It's a biological agent. Top visuals use it. It eats what you eat. You'll never feel full, but you'll never gain a gram. It's expensive." I gave him every won I had saved for my allowance for the last 2 years. I swallowed it dry right there in the alley. The change wasn't subtle. It was violent. Within an hour, the gnawing pit in my stomach, the one I'd lived with for a year, just vanished. It was replaced by a strange buzzing energy, like I'd swallowed a battery. I stopped by a convenience store and bought a package of cream bread. I hadn't touched bread in 6 months. I ate it. Then I ate a cup of ramen, then a chocolate bar. I panicked immediately after. I rushed to a public bathroom to purge, fingers down my throat, but nothing came up. My stomach felt calm, empty even. The next morning, I stepped on the scale, terrified. I had lost 0.5 kilograms, and I looked amazing. My skin, usually gray and dry from dehydration, was glowing. My hair felt thicker. The dark circles under my eyes were gone. It was a miracle. I ate fried chicken for lunch that day in front of the other trainees, and they looked at me like I was insane. But the next day, I was down another kilogram. The director praised my discipline. I felt invincible. But there was this feeling, a fluttering, not like butterflies, but deeper, like something was swimming laps in my lower intestine. I ignored it. I told myself it was just my metabolism finally waking up. It's been 4 days since I took the pill. I've lost 4 kilograms. I'm thinner than I was when I was 12. I was in the shower after practice tonight, washing off the sweat. The water was hot, steaming up the glass. I felt good, strong. I looked down at my stomach. It was flat, concave even, the hip bones jetting out sharp enough to cut. I ran my soapy hand over my abdomen. That's when I felt something. It wasn't a muscle spasm, it was distinct, a hard, rolling sensation under my skin, right above my navel. It moved from the left side to the right, slow and deliberate. I froze, water beating down on my back. I pressed my fingers into the spot. Something pressed back. I gasped and pulled my hand away. I stared at my stomach, holding my breath. For a second, nothing. Then I saw it. A ridge, about as thick as a garden hose, rose up against the inside of my skin. It slithered across my belly, pushing my flesh out, distorting my silhouette. It looked like a snake was trapped inside me, trying to find a comfortable position. It didn't hurt. That was the scariest part.
It felt numb, like when your foot falls asleep, but deep inside my guts. I watched, paralyzed, as the ridge settled and disappeared back into the soft tissue. I stood there for 20 minutes, shivering even though the water was scalding hot. I told myself it was gas, just extreme digestion, just the body rearranging itself because I was losing weight so fast. But gas doesn't feel solid. Gas doesn't feel wet. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that slithering. I tried to find the broker's number on my phone, but the contact was gone, deleted. I tried to Google the description of the silver pill, but all I found were sketchy forums about diet supplements that cause heart attacks. Nothing about things moving inside you. I sat in the kitchen of the dorm, the only light coming from the open refrigerator. I wasn't hungry. I hadn't been hungry since Tuesday, but my body was screaming for food. My hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from a need I couldn't control. I grabbed a tub of leftover kimchi stew, cold. I ate it straight from the container, then rice, then a block of tofu. As I swallowed, I felt it again. The reaction was instant. The moment the food hit my stomach, the fluttering turned into a frenzy. It felt like a washing machine on the spin cycle inside me. I clutched the counter, doubling over. It wasn't pain. The numbness was still there, but it was pressure. Intense, expanding pressure. I looked down at my shirt. My stomach was distending. Visibly. It wasn't just bloating, it was lumpy. Then I felt a bite. It was dull, muffled by whatever toxin this thing was releasing, but I felt the distinct sensation of teeth scraping against the inside of me, not chewing the food, chewing me. Panic, cold and sharp, finally cut through the denial. I ran to the sink and gagged, trying to throw up, trying to get it out. I heaved until my eyes watered, but my throat closed up. My body refused to purge. It wouldn't let me. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring into the dark drain, panting. "Get out," I whispered. "Get out of me!" Suddenly, a wave of heat shot through my abdomen. I looked down. Under the thin fabric of my pajama top, something pale and translucent pushed hard against my skin, stretching it to the breaking point. It wasn't just a ridge anymore. I could see segments. I could see a dark, churning fluid pulsing inside the shape. It pressed outward, so hard I thought my skin would tear. And for the first time, I realized the numbness was fading. A sharp, searing line of agony traced the path of the creature as it uncoiled. It had grown. It was huge, and it was still hungry.
Today is the day. The final evaluation broadcast. Live TV. My stage outfit had to be taken in twice. It's a sparkling silver two-piece, tight as a second skin. When I looked in the dressing room mirror, I didn't see Melina. I saw a mannequin. Sharp angles, hollow collarbones, thighs that didn't touch even when I stood with my feet together. I looked perfect. I looked like a star. But inside, I was screaming. The numbness is gone. Whatever toxin the Gore mom, was using to keep me quiet, it's worn off. My stomach feels like it's filled with broken glass and boiling water. But I can't stop now. The cameras are rolling. The red on-air light is glowing like a demon's eye. The music starts. Heavy bass, fast tempo. I hit the first beat. Snap. My body moves on autopilot. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. I smile at the camera, a wide, dazzling idle smile, while sweat that isn't from dancing pours down my back. Step, ball, change, pivot, body roll. During the body roll, I feel it tear. It's not a bite this time, it's a rip, a deep, thickening tear inside my abdomen like wet fabric being pulled apart. The creature is thrashing. It hates the loud music. It hates the movement. It wants out. I stumble just a fraction. The audience doesn't notice, but the other members do. I see the panic in their eyes. Keep going, I tell myself. Don't be the fat girl who messed up. Don't be the joke. I hit the chorus. I'm center stage. The spotlight is blindingly white, hot on my skin. I go for the high kick. Rip! The pain is so absolute, so blinding that my vision goes white. I feel something snap inside me, something vital. Warmth floods my stomach, soaking into the waistband of my shorts. I stop. The music keeps going, the other girls keep dancing around me, but I'm frozen. I look down. My stomach is moving, violently. Under the silver sequins, my abdomen is churning, rolling like boiling pitch. The audience gasps. It ripples through the crowd, a wave of confusion, then horror. They can see it. On the giant screens behind me, in 4K resolution, they can see the thing thrashing beneath my skin. I try to cover it with my hands, but the pressure is too strong. My knees buckle. I hit the floor hard. The microphone falls, amplifying the thud. Help! I wheeze into the silence of the arena, but nobody moves. They just watch as my stomach stretches impossibly far, the skin turning translucent under the harsh stage lights. I see the shape of it. Pale, segmented, enormous. It's not just a pill anymore. It's the size of my arm. It lunges against my skin one last time. And then everything goes red.
The lights in the hospital are different from the stage lights. They're colder, blue-white. I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my arms. I'm floating. There are doctors everywhere. They're shouting, but it sounds like they're underwater. BP is dropping. Massive internal hemorrhage. Get the scalpel, now. I try to tell them it's okay. I try to tell them I made it. I was the center. Did they see? A doctor leans over me. His mask is blue, but his eyes are terrified. He looks at my stomach, and I see him gag. He makes the incision. I don't feel the blade, but I feel the release. The pressure vanishes. The weight is gone. Something wet and heavy slithers out of me. It lands on the metal tray with a heavy, wet slap. I hear a nurse scream. It's the sound of pure, primal terror. It ate everything, the doctor whispers. Stomach, intestines, there's nothing left. I turn my head just a little. I want to see. It's there, on the tray. A pale, glistening eel, thick and coiled, pulsing with my blood. It's hideous. It's a monster. But then I look down at myself. My stomach is open, hollowed out like a pumpkin. There's nothing inside. No fat, no food, just empty, beautiful space. I smile. My vision is fading to black, tunneling down to a single point of light. I did it. The voices are fading away. The screams are getting quiet. I'm drifting into the dark, lighter than air, lighter than a feather. I'm finally perfectly empty.
Did that story make your skin crawl? That's just a taste of what's lurking. Show your support by liking and subscribing. We're all in this together to survive the next spine-chilling story.